Warning, this will be a long one. On July 18th, 64 AD, a fire started in Rome. Over the next 6 days, it would burn through the city, an unstoppable cataclysm. And when the horror was finally over, more than 70% of Rome would be burned to the ground. A young man named Nero was the emperor at the time and would forever after be associated with the Great Fire. You may have heard of him, here and there, fiddling while Rome burned. No fiddles back then. Now, there's no real evidence that Nero actually played his lyre or sang as he watched his city burn from the hills. That may have just been propaganda by political opponents, but it's a great story. There is, however, some speculation that he may have been somehow complicit in the fires, as the Senate had recently denied his desire to redesign the city in his own glory. How convenient then that it all burnt down. And how easy to blame it on that pesky new cult that kept popping up, called the Christians. Whatever the true cause of the Great Fire of Rome, herein follows the account of the devastation from the Roman historian Tacitus. Quote, "Now started the most terrible and destructive fire which Rome had ever experienced. It began in the circus, which in ancient Rome meant chariot racing, breaking out in shops selling flammable goods and fanned by the wind. The conflagration instantly grew and swept the whole length of the circus. Then it climbed the hills, but returned to ravage the lower ground again. It outstripped every countermeasure. Terrified, shrieking women, helpless old and young, people intent on their own safety, people unselfishly supporting invalids or waiting for them, fugitives and lingerers alike, all heightened the confusion. When they escaped to a neighboring quarter, the fire followed. Even districts believed remote proved to be involved. Finally, with no idea where or what to flee, they crowded onto the country roads or lay in the fields. Some who had lost everything, even their food for the day, could have escaped, but preferred to die. So did others who had failed to rescue their loved ones. Nobody dared fight the flames. Attempts to do so were prevented by menacing gangs. Torches, too, were openly thrown in by men crying that they had acted under orders. Perhaps they had received orders, or they may have just wanted to plunder unhampered." End quote. Now, I'm not trying to imply that our fires were deliberately started by the state. That's an Alex Jones level of analysis, and I'm not quite that intense yet. But what I am saying is that incompetence and negligence taken to their extreme, which we have seen here, is fundamentally indistinguishable from sabotage or attack. So here's what we know so far. The extremely flammable deadfall and dried brush filling the hills and forests of Los Angeles hadn't been cleared for years due to environmental reasons, essentially creating a tinderbox. The main reservoir of the Palisades, that's supposed to hold 117 million gallons of water, had been empty for years for repairs, greatly reducing the amount of working fire hydrants. And this, despite a warning only weeks before that the dangers of wildfires in the area were extreme. Furthermore, vast amounts of water that could have been used to prepare for this catastrophe was redirected into the ocean instead of actually collected, again for environmental reasons. And finally, our intrepid mayor, after cutting the fire budget by $17 million, was in Ghana to attend a party. And the governor basically just doesn't give a fuck about anything but his own vanity and power. And though the firefighters and first responders are truly heroes of the highest order, I would like to have been a fireman. The leadership of the department seems to have been more concerned with diversity and equity and appearances rather than actually being prepared to keep the city from burning down. A few days ago, a very kind and smart friend of mine said, "Now is not the time to place blame, but to give comfort." And I must say, she's absolutely wrong. Now is exactly the time to place blame, so that we can ensure that a preventable disaster like this never happens again. And though we must first, obviously, get rid of Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom, obviously, the real culprit and danger is the pernicious ideology that allowed these idiots the power to implement such naive and destructive policies to begin with. Call it wokeness, progressivism, postmodernism, liberalism. Sadly, the opposite of what it once meant. Ideas are what make or break a civilization. And so in the end, what this former liberal anarchist is putting out is a call to consider conservatism. Because what conservatism actually conserves is competency, and a merit-driven system that allows the most capable among us to ascend to positions of power and responsibility, an idea which is crucial for our survival. Because as we now so tragically see, when competence is abandoned, civilizations